Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant! Insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies win edition. My name is Keith Parrish. Ja Morant made his return and then tweaked his ankle. Zach Edey made his Grizzlies debut, and the Grizzlies edged out the Dallas Mavericks for the preseason victory. On today's episode, I will talk about the game and Ja's injury. I'll go over the rotation and all the players who played. Before I do so, just an invitation for you to come play fantasy basketball with me in one of my Patreon leagues over at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. First of all, Patreon, it's the best way for you to support me and this independent podcast. But also, if you join the Patreon, you can be a part of my Slack channel and play fantasy basketball with me and other listeners. There is the Negative Fantasy League. The signups are going on right now. The draft for the Negative League is October 20th. So get in there now, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, the biggest storylines from the Grizzlies' first preseason game, of course, Ja Morant's injury, then also Zach Edey making his debut. We want to know how he looked, what he would look like against NBA competition. And then for me, I think the most interesting thing was the rotation tweak in the second half, where Zach Edey did not start the second half. Brandon Clarke started the second half. So let's get right to it. Ja looked good when he played, but in the first half, he twisted his ankle. His right foot rolled over a little bit during a fast break when he was running back on defense, and the ball actually hit his foot. So he limps off the court. He eventually comes back at the end of the second quarter. Then in the second half, he looks really, really sharp. He converted several plays in the paint, and then he scored off a back cut where he was assisted by Brandon Clarke, makes a dunk, comes down, obviously has aggravated or bothered the previous injury, and he leaves the game. The report after the game is it's, quote, nothing, that he just tweaked his foot and they're not worried about it. Of course, that's easy for them to say. We are worried about it. We keep battling injuries as a team and a franchise, and Ja himself is, I think, fair to be called injury prone. So Ja Morant not finishing this game, still not ideal. So his status, along with a lot of other guys, Jaren Jackson Jr., and then, of course, Vince Williams Jr. and Gigi Jackson, his status for the rest of preseason or the next couple games will be up in the air. But beyond worrying about the injury, which of course is a major concern, everything else for the Grizzlies I thought looked pretty promising. There were some good things. There were some bad things. The team turned the basketball over a ton. I don't really think that's a product of the new offense. I think that's just first preseason game. I thought the pace was extremely good for the Grizzlies. They've always been decently good, or actually rather good, at pace since Ja Morant has been on the team, but you saw everybody getting the ball up and down the court very, very quickly. They were able to attack the Mavericks a lot that way. And yeah, the pace in that situation does contribute to maybe more turnovers, but I'm not bothered by that in any way. Now, as far as Zach Edey, it was an up and down debut. He finished off a great alley-oop from a sidelines out of bounds play where Ja lobbed it to him. And I mean, Zach, of course, is huge, but also his head's above the rim. He's actually getting off the ground, so that was cool to see. He blocked a shot. He had a rebound where he had boxed out Daniel Gafford so hard that Gafford was like flailing around, frustrated because he couldn't get around him. I loved seeing that. There were moments where he looked a little clumsy, looked awkward. He had not that many post-ups, but he wasn't as maybe secure with the ball as I would have hoped. In the fourth quarter, he had a post-up over the Mavs rookie center, who also was gigantic, Jamarion Sharp. He had a post-up where he scored comfortably over him, but then there was a post-up against Dwight Powell. He lost the ball. There was another time where Luke Kennard found him in traffic, and he lost control of the ball. So up and down for Edey. He finishes with 5 fouls and 3 turnovers, and then the 6 points, 7 rebounds, and a block. So not bad, not overwhelming. I would call it a fine debut for Zach Edey. Now, as far as the rotation, with no Jaren Jackson Jr., Santi Aldama got the start, so the starters were Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Santi Aldama, and Zach Edey. And the 10-man rotation was finished off with this 5-man bench unit of Scotty Pippen Jr., Luke Kennard, John Conchar, Jake LaRavia, and Brandon Clarke. John Conchar was the first sub off the bench. I don't think that means he's the most important sub. It's because I think they were staggering the guards. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Marcus Smart. They're usually going to stagger those guys a little bit. But Marcus was the first guy to come out, so Conchar comes in at the 3. The second unit, it's pretty small. Lots of the lineups the Grizzlies played on Monday night were a little bit small. Like Jake LaRavia essentially only played power forward until the final 5 minutes when he shared the court with Malginha Pereira and Jay Huff. So LaRavia is your 4 and Brandon Clarke is your 5. That is rather tiny. They actually ended the first half with the first time that Ja and Luke and Desmond all shared the court together, and it was Ja Morant, Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart as the 4, and Brandon Clarke as the 5. I like that lineup, but I think overall my takeaway from the first preseason game, where of course there's no Jaren Jackson Jr., is just how the Mavericks were taller than the Grizzlies at almost all times, not counting Zach Edey. All of the Mavericks perimeter players taller than all of the Grizzlies players usually. Like you had Scotty Pippen, Desmond Bane, John Conchar, Jake LaRavia, and Brandon Clarke playing several minutes together. That's rather small. So small ball is going to be a weapon to be used, but I feel like that's a thing that should be a tool that you deploy at some times, not a staple that you're forced to play all the time. Now, rebounding was not an issue in this game. You could make the argument the Grizzlies won this game because of their rebounding. Specifically in the fourth quarter when the Grizzlies emptied their bench, the Grizzlies out-rebounded the Mavericks by 10 rebounds in just the fourth quarter. So the Grizzlies won second chance points for the game. They had more offensive rebounds. They had more field goal attempts. They won the possession battle in this one, and that's why you get the close victory. But the overall takeaway from the first preseason game as far as the rotation, it was just, okay, a little bit on the small side. Now, there were some lineups that looked really, really good together. Of course, I think at the start of the second half, when Brandon Clarke was in there, just everything looked so much sharper. Now, I do not think that is in any relation, really, to Zach Edey. I think it's more to do with the fact that maybe they came out in the second half and Ja Morant and Desmond Bane were more locked in, maybe a little bit more focused. In the first half, Ja missed some easy shots. Desmond Bane was turning the basketball over. He also turned the basketball over in the second half. But I felt like the opening to the third quarter, everything was crisp. Bane was running around like mad. The ball was moving really, really well. There were numerous assists from the big guys, and maybe you give credit to whatever this new offensive scheme is. I give credit a lot of the times to the cutters, but the big men, Santi Aldama and Brandon Clarke, both picked up multiple assists where they were hitting guys for open layups. That was really cool to see. I think maybe the best play of the game, maybe outside of a Zach Edey alley-oop, the best play of the game for me was a ball movement possession where Brandon Clarke and Desmond Bane just kept passing the ball back and forth between each other. There was maybe one dribble involved. The dribble wasn't even necessary, but Brandon Clarke finds a cutting Desmond Bane for the layup. That ball movement, all really, really good. And the Grizzlies built a little bit of a lead at that point the Mavericks got back in it with some three-point shooting before the Grizzlies finally won. But I was really encouraged, I think, by the play of the bigs between Brandon Clarke. I mean, Brandon Clarke shot the ball a lot. Santi Aldama looked very sharp. I think it was a very good game from him. He finished with 11 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. And the combination of him and Brandon looks really, really good. Probably helped out by the fact that they were playing alongside Marcus and Dez and Ja. But I find that very interesting that that was the chosen starting lineup for the second half. We have assumed all along after drafting Zach Edey that he was the starter. Part of that was because Brandon Clarke was asked straight up, are you thinking you're going to start this year? Do you want to start? And he said, no, I like coming off the bench. So we're like, okay, Zach Edey, you're a rookie, but you're going to start for the Memphis Grizzlies. And they did start him in the first half, but in the second half, I don't know if it was matchup based or if they just wanted to go ahead and see what it looks like starting the half with Brandon Clarke. I mean, Brandon Clarke, as of now, I think it's safe to call him the superior player. I don't think that's controversial. Zach Edey still unproven. Unproven in the NBA. Brandon Clarke, very, very useful NBA player, so they went with the more proven veteran to start the second half. I will be interested to see if maybe Zach Edey is not always starting. The benefit for Zach Edey not starting is he gets some easier matchups sometimes, usually coming off the bench. Maybe the bench unit can revolve more around giving Zach Edey the ball. But I thought that was notable, how they tried it both ways. I thought maybe he just wasn't going to play in the second half when Brandon Clarke started the second half. But then when he comes in late in the third quarter, I was like, oh, this is very, very interesting. Now, one player I don't think I've mentioned yet or talked much about yet who had a great game, it was Scotty Pippen Jr. Scotty Pippen Jr. had a whale of a game. Made a large impact immediately upon checking in. He had a 4-point play. Then he hit another 3-pointer. He drew a 2-shot foul driving towards the basket. He drew an offensive foul. In the second half, he forced a turnover where he was pressing full court. Doesn't get credit for a steal, but he knocked the ball off the Mavericks player. He scored driving towards the basket. Ended up making all 4 of his field goal attempts. Finishes with 12 points and 6 assists. He did turn the basketball over 5 times. And while that is a product of preseason game 1, turnovers are still a thing to monitor with Scotty Pippen Jr. He turns the ball over maybe a little bit too much for a primary guard. But that's not to take away from the fact that he looked like one of the best players out there when he was on the court. He absolutely had one of the better games of all the Grizzlies players. And for somebody who is been offered essentially the open roster spot, if he can seize it, I feel like this was a big step towards the Grizzlies going ahead and offering him a full contract and saying, yeah, you can be our 14th player. We'll go ahead and lock you up on a standard deal. So Scottie Pippen Jr. had a very strong first game. And honestly, let's talk more about Brandon Clarke, who did start that second half. Brandon Clarke was gunning in this game. He took 13 field goal attempts. He took 5 3-pointers. He made 2 of them. He was a woeful 1 for 5 from the foul line. So that's not great. But I liked aggressive Brandon Clarke. Maybe there's times where we're going to groan where he's shooting the 3-pointer, but they want to shoot 3-pointers. I mean, they got up a ton of 3-pointers in this game. In the first quarter, they took 12 3-pointers. They had 22 3-point attempts in the first half. Now they slowed down in the second half as far as their 3-point attempt rate, but they got up a lot of threes, and Brandon took 5 of them. Brandon said at training camp, he wants to get back to his rookie season where he shot 40% from 3. He's looking to shoot 3-pointers this year. Brandon also missed a lot of makeable shots. It could have been a massive game for Brandon, but I did not mind aggressive Brandon Clarke at all. I didn't even mind 3-point shooting Brandon Clarke. 3-point shots create offensive rebounds a lot of times. It doesn't bug me at all, and it should open up driving lanes for others. Now, I talk a lot last year about how we had so many bad shooters shooting 3-pointers that you can't act surprised when the team shoots 30% or whatever. And yeah, having Brandon take a lot of those threes might lead to that some this season. But as of now, I say, let's space it out. We need some more spacing. We have to play some bigger players, I think. So Brandon, you currently have the green light from me. Not that it matters. Maybe that green light will be rescinded at some point. Now, Desmond Bane was very, very active in this game. He did not shoot the ball particularly well, was only 1 out of 8 from the 3-point line, but he just moves. And it's impressive how much just his running around causes everything else to happen. He does finish with 11 points. He gets 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Now, Ja Morant, we talked about the injury, nothing to be concerned about, but had 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. I thought his second half, the few minutes he played in the third quarter, he was really excellent. That was very exciting to see. Conchar had 5 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, a steal, and a block. Jake LaRavia, he played really, really well. He stepped in again as the power forward, almost exclusively played at power forward, but he shot the ball well, made 2 out of 3 3-pointers. Luke Kennard made 2 out of 5 3-pointers. He had 6 points and 4 assists. Had to play a little bit of point guard because of the way the rotation went with Ja Morant getting hurt. They took him off the court. Obviously, Scotty Pippen Jr. came in a little bit earlier than anticipated, so Luke had to do a bit more dribbling. Now, in the fourth quarter, Jaylen Wells finally got in. We also got minutes for Yuki Kawamura. Jay Huff played Malgina Pereira. Pereira was one of the big reasons the Grizzlies dominated the rebounding in the fourth quarter. Jaylen Wells got up 11 field goal attempts in the fourth quarter. Very aggressive from Jaylen. He made his first 3-pointer on a play where there was some tremendous ball movement. They whipped it around, got him an open look from the top of the key. His next shot, he missed it high off the backboard while shooting a corner 3-pointer. Not ideal. But then he hit a pull-up 3 in transition. After that, he ends up being the one who ices the game with a 3-pointer in the final minute. Yuki Kawamura got in with 9 minutes left. He hits his first 3-pointer that he takes, drills a corner 3, finishes with 5 points and 3 assists. Jay Huff missed all 3 of his 3-point attempts, and that does it for everyone who played. Pereira got 7 rebounds in the 8 minutes of playing time that he got at the end of the game. And I think with that basically wraps up everything we need to talk about. Of course, most importantly, we're waiting to see if Ja Morant's injury is anything to be concerned about, whether or not it keeps him out. I mean, I would guess it would keep him out of the preseason game against the Hornets, the home debut for the Grizzlies this Thursday. By the way, that, of course, will be televised locally on Bally Sports. I guess it's sort of interesting about the TV stuff. I mean, they haven't come out and outright said it yet, but Bally Sports is going to change its name to FanDuel TV, and that's where the Grizzlies games are going to be. This game on Monday was not televised locally, but it was available on League Pass. And on the one hand, I'm always disappointed when the games aren't available locally, but as someone who pays for League Pass, having the games available on League Pass is extremely convenient. It actually has benefits over it just being a locally televised game with blackout rules in effect. The Grizzlies preseason game against the Bulls also not going to be televised locally. I assume that will be available on League Pass and not blacked out. I do appreciate whatever efforts have been made by the Grizzlies to make sure the blackout is lifted. Because there are other times, there have been other preseasons in years past where the game won't be televised in the Grizzlies television market, and it's also blacked out, which is always the what in the world are you doing situation. You have the television rights, you're not televising it, so why would you black it out? I've always been told it's hard to change the blackouts, but I appreciate if any efforts or whatever efforts were made, I absolutely appreciate the fact that this game was easily accessible on League Pass, so we get to see the Grizzlies' first game. So they play Thursday against the Hornets at home. will Ja play? Who knows? Will Yuki Kawamura play a ton of the game because they don't have that many point guards? Perhaps. And then they play on the road Saturday against the Bulls. And then after that, 2 more preseason games, Pacers game and a Heat game. So things to monitor. Do they keep messing around with the starting lineup? Are they going to start anybody but Santi Aldama as the starting power forward? Will Brandon Clarke actually start in the first quarter of games? Maybe they'll just stick with Zach Edey. Other things to watch. Will Scotty Pippen Jr. keep playing this well? Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart, he finished with 6 points, all of them at the foul line. Got to the foul line 7 times, made 6 out of 7. He missed all of his 3 field goal attempts. He got 5 assists, put that against 3 turnovers. We're still monitoring Marcus Smart's turnover issues. He turned the ball over a lot last season. But things for me to watch outside of the main issues with Ja Morant's health. How does Zach Edey look in future games? Do they mix up the starting lineup at all? Do they mix up the rotations at all? Does Jake LaRavia keep looking this comfortable? Does Santi Aldama keep looking this comfortable? Does Scotty Pippen Jr. basically force the front office's hand by giving him a standard contract? These are all things definitely to keep watching. Does Jaylen Wells get some earlier run? Maybe in one of the upcoming preseason games that will also be something to monitor. And with that, I say thanks for listening. If you want to support the show, again, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Come play fantasy basketball with me. Come get a monthly bonus episode. Come join the Grits and Grinds Grizzlies Slack channel. Do all that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you don't already. All right. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.